In this episode, we're going to talk about a problem that shows up the moment a team tries to move fast and stay safe at the same time. How do you test new changes in real conditions without confusing everyone about what is stable? Automation makes this tension sharper because it often runs unattended and it can touch important systems, so the difference between a testable version and a dependable version really matters. Pre-release versions are a way to label software that is not yet considered stable, even if it is close, so teams can try it, measure it, and learn from it without accidentally treating it like a final release. The core idea is simple. You want a safe lane where change can be exercised, and you want a stable lane where operations can trust what they are running. Pre-release versioning gives you a naming system that keeps those lanes separate while still connecting them. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. To make pre-release versions make sense, it helps to anchor them to semantic versioning, because pre-release labels are built to extend that same communication style. A normal release version is meant to be stable and generally safe to consume according to the rules you set for major, minor, and patch changes. A pre-release version is a version number that says, this is related to an upcoming release, but it is not the final, production-ready form yet. The value of that label is that it makes the risk visible before anyone installs, deploys, or depends on it. Beginners sometimes think testing is separate from versioning, but in real teams, testing and versioning are deeply connected. If you cannot clearly identify which build is experimental and which build is stable, you will eventually deploy the wrong thing, or you will waste time arguing about what should be trusted. Pre-release versions prevent that confusion by making the status explicit. A pre-release version typically looks like a normal version number with an extra tag appended, such as an alpha, beta, or release candidate label. Those words have common meanings even across different teams, and the details can vary, but the general idea is consistent. Alpha often means early and potentially rough. Beta often means more feature complete, but still being validated. And a release candidate often means the team believes it is nearly ready and is looking for final confirmation. You do not need to treat these labels as rigid stages. What matters is that they signal increasing confidence. In automation projects, this stage confidence is helpful because it lets you test changes with a gradually expanding audience and exposure. You can start with a small, controlled set of runs, then expand to broader testing once the version behaves well. The pre-release label tells everyone, this is not the final promise yet, so treat it accordingly. One of the biggest benefits of pre-release versions is that they allow realistic testing without forcing you to declare stability too early. If you only create stable releases, you might feel pressure to publish even when you are not fully confident, because you need a version number for a test environment to consume. That pressure can lead to stable releases that are not truly stable, which damages trust in your versioning. Pre-release versions remove that pressure by providing a legitimate, clearly labeled category for trial builds. When your test environment uses a pre-release version, everyone understands that failures and changes are part of the process. When your production environment uses a stable release, everyone understands that it should be dependable, and if it isn't, that's a serious issue. This separation supports a healthy culture where stability is protected, not blurred. Pre-release versions also help you avoid what it means to pollute stable releases, which is when the stable channel becomes filled with experimental or frequently changing builds. Pollution is a real operational problem because it makes it hard to know what to deploy, hard to reproduce behavior, and hard to roll back with confidence. If your stable releases include half-tested changes, then the label stable stops meaning anything, and people start building their own private rules for what is safe. That is how teams end up with inconsistent environments, where one group pins to a random older version because they no longer trust new ones. With pre-release versions, you keep experimentation visible and contained, so the stable releases remain rare, meaningful, and trustworthy. Trust is not a fluffy concept here. It directly affects how quickly and safely automation can be deployed. Another reason pre-release versions matter is that they support feedback loops, which are how you learn whether changes behave correctly under real conditions. Many automation bugs only appear under specific timing, load, network variability, or data patterns that are hard to simulate perfectly. A pre-release version lets you run the new code in a test or staging environment that resembles production, gather evidence, and adjust quickly. Because the version is labeled as pre-release, you can release multiple iterations without pretending each one is a final statement. For beginners, this is a powerful lesson in mature software practice. You can move forward in small steps while keeping the stable line clean. This is not about writing more code. It is about organizing change so the team can test and learn without unnecessary risk. Pre-release versioning also improves communication between developers and operations, which is especially important in automation teams. Developers often want changes to be exercised quickly, while operations teams want to minimize risk and preserve predictability. A pre-release label creates a shared agreement. This build is meant for validation, not for permanent reliance. That agreement makes it easier for operations to accept controlled exposure because they are not being asked to treat experimental code as final. It also makes it easier for developers to gather real feedback because the build is being used in meaningful conditions. In this way, version labels become a coordination tool, not just a naming convention. Beginners should notice how much friction disappears when everyone can point at the version number and agree on what it represents. There is also a dependency angle that matters for deployability. Automation often depends on libraries, and other systems may depend on the automation itself, so version selection decisions ripple outward. Many systems treat pre-release versions differently, often requiring an explicit choice to consume them. That behavior is useful because it prevents accidental upgrades into unstable builds. In other words, pre-release versions can act like a safety catch. You have to intentionally opt in to use them. This reduces the chance that a stable environment suddenly picks up a pre-release build because of an automated update rule. The more automated your delivery pipeline becomes, the more valuable it is to have signals that automated systems can interpret safely. Pre-release labeling provides exactly that kind of signal. A common beginner misconception is that pre-release versions are only for huge products with massive teams, but they are actually most valuable when you are trying to build discipline early. Small teams and solo projects often skip pre-releases, and then they wonder why every release feels stressful. The stress comes from mixing testing and stability in the same channel. When you adopt pre-release versions, you create room to test without creating panic, and that is useful at any scale. Another misconception is that pre-release versions are inherently unsafe, but the truth is more nuanced. A release candidate might be very stable, and in some cases it might be safer than a stable release that was rushed. The label is not a judgment of quality. It is a declaration of status and expectation. That expectation is what keeps your release process honest and your stable lane clean. Pre-release versions also encourage better release readiness thinking, because they force you to articulate what must be true before something becomes stable. If you are labeling builds as beta or release candidate, you are implicitly saying there is a checklist of confidence you are still working through. That checklist might include passing tests, successful runs and staging, no regressions in key behaviors, and acceptable performance and error handling. You do not need to formalize that checklist to benefit from the concept, but you should recognize that stability is earned through evidence. Automation is especially sensitive to this because a change that seems correct in a quiet test can fail under the stress of real scheduling, real credentials, and real data variability. Pre-release versions create the space to gather evidence before you declare that stability has been achieved. To bring it all together, pre-release versions let you test safely by making experimental status visible and by keeping stable releases meaningful. They support realistic validation without forcing you to pretend every test build is final, and they prevent the stable channel from becoming cluttered with half-tested changes that undermine trust. For deployable automation, this matters because deployment decisions often need to be made quickly and confidently, and version labels are one of the simplest signals you can use. When you see a pre-release tag, you know you are stepping into a validation lane, and you can plan accordingly. When you see a stable version, you know the team is making a stronger compatibility and reliability promise. Using pre-release versions well is one of the cleanest ways to move fast without losing control, which is exactly what modern automation work demands.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.